The envelope in my hand was marked, "Urgent boardroom delivery," but my brother wasn't going to let me through the glass doors. Trevor stood with his arms crossed, his expensive suit fitting perfectly, his expression a mixture of amusement and condescension. "What are you doing here, Kyle?" he asked, though his tone suggested he already knew and found it hilarious. "Delivery for the board meeting," I said, holding up the envelope. "Mr. Patterson in legal said it was time-sensitive." "Right. The mailroom guy." Trevor's smile widened. "Here's the thing, little brother. Board meetings are for actual executives. People who make decisions. Not for people who sort envelopes and push mail carts. I just need to drop this off. Give it to me. I'll make sure it gets to the right person." He held out his hand expectantly. "Mr. Patterson specifically said to deliver it to the board directly. And I'm telling you that you're not walking into that boardroom looking like that." Trevor gestured at my simple button-down shirt and khakis, the standard uniform for facilities staff at Harman Industries. "Do you have any idea who's in there?" "The executive team. Major shareholders. Our biggest clients. They don't need to see the help wandering through important meetings." Behind him, through the glass walls, I could see the boardroom table. My father sat at the head, looking every inch the CO he'd been for 30 years. Next to him was Martin Sawyer, the COO, and around the table sat a dozen other executives and board members I recognized from company directories. "Trevor, this is marked urgent." "Then you should have brought it up faster." He plucked the envelope from my hands. "I'll take care of it. You can go back downstairs now. I'm sure there are packages that need sorting." Mr. Patterson said. "Kyle." Trevor's voice hardened. "I'm the VP of Corporate Development. You're a mailroom clerk. We're not equals here, and we're certainly not going to have a debate about corporate protocol in front of the boardroom. Go. Downstairs." I met his eyes for a long moment, then nodded. "Okay, Trevor." As I walked toward the elevator, I heard him mutter to someone behind him, "My little brother. Mom insisted we give him a job here. Can't handle anything more complicated than sorting mail, but what can you do?" The elevator doors closed on the sound of polite laughter. I'd been working at Harman Industries for 6 months now, ever since I'd returned from overseas. The mailroom position was temporary, or at least that's what I'd told myself when I took it. A quiet job while I figured out my next move. A way to stay under the radar. My family didn't know I'd come back to the States with money. Significant money. They didn't know about the tech startup I'd co-founded in Singapore 4 years ago, or about the acquisition that had made me and my partners extremely wealthy. They didn't know I'd spent the past 6 months quietly buying shares in Harman Industries through a network of shell companies and investment vehicles. They just knew that Kyle had finally come home after wandering around Asia for years, and that he'd needed a job, and that the mailroom was probably the best he could handle. My father had been skeptical about hiring me at all. "The company isn't a charity, Kyle. If you work here, you work. No special treatment because you're my son." I'd assured him I didn't want special treatment. Trevor, on the other hand, had been delighted. It gave him another opportunity to highlight the contrast between the successful son who'd risen through the ranks and the disappointment who sorted packages. My mother had been quietly embarrassed. "I wish you'd done something with your life, dear. Trevor is VP now. Your sister is a surgeon. And you're delivering mail." I'd smiled and told her the mailroom suited me fine. Back at my desk in the basement, I resumed sorting the afternoon delivery. My supervisor, Rita, appeared with a coffee and her usual kind smile. She was 63, had worked at Harman Industries for 40 years, and treated everyone with the same warmth regardless of their position. "How'd the delivery go?" she asked. "Trevor took it. Didn't want me in the boardroom." Rita's expression soured. "That boy has too much pride. You're his brother. Half the company doesn't know that. He prefers it that way. Well, he shouldn't. Family is family." She patted my shoulder. "Don't let him get to you. You're doing good work here." "Thanks, Rita." After she left, I checked my phone. A text from my lawyer, James Chin. "Paperwork is filed. You now own 73% of Harman Industries common stock. Congratulations." I typed back, "Keep it quiet for now." "Understood. Let me know when you want to make it public." I slipped the phone back into my pocket and returned to sorting mail. The company my grandfather had founded 50 years ago was now primarily mine. I'd spent 6 months and approximately $340 million acquiring shares through dozens of shell companies, buying out small shareholders, purchasing blocks from retiring board members, and gradually accumulating a controlling interest. Nobody had noticed because nobody was looking. The transactions were small, scattered, and routed through enough legal entities that they appeared unconnected. My father owned 15% of the company directly. Trevor had 3% from his executive compensation. Various board members and institutional investors held the rest. Or they had until I'd systematically bought them out. Now I own 73% and nobody knew it except my lawyers. I wasn't sure yet when I'd reveal this. Part of me was content to keep working in the mailroom, watching the company from the inside, learning its operations at the ground level. Another part of me wanted to wait for the right moment. A moment when the revelation would mean something. That moment came 3 weeks later. I was sorting packages when Rita called me into her small office. "Kyle, there's a situation. Trevor just sent down a directive. He wants all mailroom staff to work through the weekend. No overtime pay, just volunteer hours to show company loyalty." "He can't do that. He's VP of Corporate Development. He says he can." Rita's jaw tightened. "He's been pushing for layoffs in facilities for months. Says we're overstaffed. This is his way of forcing people to quit so he doesn't have to pay severance." "How many people does this affect?" 12. "Most of them have been here for 20+ years." Her voice dropped. "Kyle, I can't afford to lose this job. I'm 3 years from retirement. But I also can't work every weekend for free. My husband has health issues. I need to be home." I looked at the directive on her desk. Trevor's signature at the bottom, bold and self-important. "Don't worry about it, Rita. I'll handle this." "You? How?" "Let me make some calls." That evening I messaged James Chin. "Time to make it public. File the disclosure forms tomorrow morning." "Are you sure?" "Completely sure. This is going to cause quite a stir." "I'm counting on it." The next morning I arrived at work early. The mail room was quiet, most staff not due for another hour. I changed out of my usual casual clothes and into one of the suits I'd kept in my car, a sharp charcoal gray that I hadn't worn since my Singapore days. At 8:47 a.m., James filed the disclosure forms with the SEC, revealing that Kyle Harmon, through various investment vehicles, now controlled 73% of Harmon Industries' voting shares. At 8:51 a.m., my father's assistant called an emergency board meeting. At 9:15 a.m. I took the elevator up to the executive floor. The boardroom was in chaos when I arrived. Executives were shouting into phones, pulling up documents on laptops and arguing in tight clusters. My father stood at the head of the table, his face pale, staring at a printed disclosure form. Trevor was near the windows, speaking urgently with Martin Sawyer. "It has to be a mistake. Kyle doesn't have that kind of money. He works in the mail room." I knocked on the glass door. Every head turned. The room went silent. Trevor's expression cycled through confusion, disbelief, and then anger as he took in my suit, my confident posture, my complete lack of deference. "What are you doing here?" he demanded. "I'm here for the board meeting. I received notice of an emergency session. This is for executives only. I told you before." "Trevor." My father's voice cut across the room. "Is this real? Did you really acquire 73% of this company?" "Yes, sir." The silence that followed was deafening. Martin Sawyer found his voice first. "How? Where did you get that kind of capital?" "I co-founded a tech company in Singapore 4 years ago. Venture capital-backed, rapid growth, acquired by a larger firm 18 months ago. My share of the acquisition was substantial." I walked calmly to an empty chair at the table and sat down. "I've been investing it carefully since then." "Why didn't you tell us?" my father asked, his voice strained. "I tried. 4 years ago when the company was just getting funded. I called you Dad. You said you didn't have time to hear about another one of my schemes, and that I should focus on getting a real job." I smiled without humor. "So I did. I got a very real job. Then I sold it." Trevor slammed his hand on the table. "This is insane. You can't just buy up a company without disclosure." Every transaction was legal and properly reported. The disclosure threshold for ownership in a private individual isn't triggered until you cross certain percentages. I structured my purchases to stay below those thresholds until now. I nodded toward the corporate lawyer, Jennifer Park, who was frantically reviewing documents at the far end of the table. Jennifer can confirm everything was done by the book. Jennifer looked up, her expression professionally neutral. The filings all appear to be in order. The ownership is legitimate. My father sat down heavily. Cal, what is this about? Why go to all this trouble to buy the company in secret? Because I wanted to understand it first. I wanted to see how it really operated from the ground up. And I wanted to see how the family would treat me when they thought I was nobody important. I looked at Trevor. Turns out the answer is, pretty badly. That's not fair, Trevor started. You wouldn't let me deliver a legal document to this room because you were embarrassed by my clothes. You've spent 6 months making jokes about your mailroom brother to anyone who would listen. You just tried to force the entire facility staff to work unpaid weekends so you could create justification for layoffs. I pulled out my phone and forwarded an email. That directive is cancelled, by the way. I just sent a company-wide memo. You can't do that. I own 73% of the company, Trevor. I can do quite a lot. My father rubbed his temples. Let me understand this. You've been working in the mailroom, living in that small apartment downtown, driving that old car. All of it was an act. Not an act. A choice. I like living simply. The apartment is comfortable, the car is reliable, and the mailroom gave me perspective. I met his eyes. I learned more about this company in 6 months downstairs than I would have in 6 years in an executive office. I learned that Rita has been here 40 years and knows every process inside and out. I learned that Marcus in shipping has ideas for optimizing logistics that could save us millions. I learned that Trevor has been systematically undermining experienced staff to replace them with cheaper contractors. Trevor's face flushed. That's business. We need to stay competitive. That's short-sighted cost-cutting that destroys institutional knowledge and employee loyalty. It's also stopping now. Martin Sawyer leaned forward. Cal, what exactly are your intentions here? Are you planning to take control of the company? I already have control. The question is what I plan to do with it. The room waited. First, I said, I'm joining the board. As majority shareholder, I'm entitled to a seat. I'll take my grandfather's old position. My father nodded slowly. That's reasonable. Second, I want a full operational review. Every department, every process, every line item in the budget. I want to understand where we're efficient and where we're wasting resources. That will take months, Martin protested. Then we'd better start soon. Third, I'm restructuring executive compensation. Too much emphasis on short-term stock price, not enough on long-term value creation and employee retention. Trevor stood abruptly. You can't just walk in here and... I can actually. That's what majority ownership means. I turned to Jennifer. I'll need you to draft new employment agreements for the executive team. Performance metrics tied to employee satisfaction, operational efficiency, and sustainable growth rather than quarterly earnings. You're going to destroy the company, Trevor said, his voice shaking with anger. You have no experience running a business at this scale. You made money on some tech startup. Congratulations. But this is manufacturing, logistics, supply chain. It's completely different. You're right. Which is why I'm not planning to run day-to-day operations. Dad will stay on as CEO at least for now. Martin will continue as CEO. The existing management structure remains in place. I could see my father relax slightly. However, I continued, major decisions now require my approval. Acquisitions, divestitures, significant capital expenditures, executive hires and terminations, all of it comes through me. That's impossible, Trevor protested. We'll be paralyzed. Every decision will take weeks. Then you'll learn to make better decisions the first time. I looked at him steadily. And Trevor, your proposal to merge with Quantum Systems? The one you've been negotiating for the past 3 months? The $280 million deal that would make you CEO of the combined entity. His face went very still. I reviewed the terms last night. You were planning to announce it at today's board meeting, weren't you? Before this emergency meeting got called. I pulled out a folder. The deal undervalues Harman Industries by at least 30%. It gives away our most profitable divisions while retaining the legacy manufacturing that's losing money. And coincidentally, Your compensation package in the merged company would be worth about $40 million over 5 years. That deal would save this company. That deal would save your career while gutting everything our grandfather built. It's a terrible deal for Harman Industries, a mediocre deal for Quantum, and an excellent deal for Trevor Harman personally. I slid the folder across the table to my father. I'm voting against it. With 73% ownership, that means it's dead. The color drained from Trevor's face. You can't. Months of work. Quantum is expecting. Quantum can find another acquisition target. We're not interested. Jennifer spoke up carefully. Mr. Harman, Kyle, the agreements with Quantum include breakup fees if we back out now. Approximately $12 million. Pay them. Consider it tuition for learning not to pursue deals that benefit executives more than shareholders. My father was reading through the folder, his expression growing darker with each page. Trevor, is this accurate? Were you really planning to sell off the advanced materials division? It's not profitable in the short term. It's the future of the company. Your grandfather started that division. It's 20 years from peak profitability, but it's our strongest growth area. My father looked at his oldest son with something between disappointment and anger. What were you thinking? I was thinking about survival. About making the hard choices you've been too sentimental to make. Trevor's voice rose. You've been running this company like it's still 1985. Lifetime employment, generous benefits, loyalty over performance. The market doesn't care about any of that. We need to be lean, aggressive, profitable. We need to be sustainable, I corrected. Profitable, yes. But not at the cost of everything that makes this company worth owning. Trevor turned on me. You don't understand. You've been here 6 months. 6 months. I've been working in this business for 12 years. I've earned my position. I've made sacrifices. And you think you can just buy your way in and tell me how to run things? I don't think it. I know it. Because I own 73% of the company, and you own 3%. Kept my voice level. This isn't about earning anything, Trevor. This is about legal ownership and fiduciary responsibility. And right now, my responsibility is to the company and its stakeholders, which includes employees, customers, and the community, not just executive bonuses. This is personal. You're doing this because I wouldn't let you in the boardroom. Because I treated you like the nobody you appeared to be. Partially, I admitted. But mostly I'm doing this because the Quantum deal is genuinely terrible. And because your approach to management is destroying the company culture our grandfather spent 50 years building. My father set down the folder. Kyle is right. Trevor, this deal is unacceptable. How could you even consider it? Because someone needs to make the hard decisions around here. Someone needs to be willing to. Trevor stopped, seemed to realize he was shouting. He took a breath. Fine. You want to block the deal? Block it. But don't blame me when this company collapses because we weren't willing to evolve. Evolution doesn't mean gutting everything valuable, I said quietly. It means building on what works while fixing what doesn't. The meeting continued for another 2 hours. We reviewed financials, discussed strategic priorities, and established new governance protocols. My father looked exhausted by the end. Trevor looked furious. The other board members seemed cautiously optimistic, though clearly uncertain about this dramatic power shift. As people filed out, my father gestured for me to stay. Cal, I need to understand. Why the secrecy? Why work in the mailroom instead of just revealing who you were from the start? Because I needed to see the truth. If I'd come in as a wealthy investor, everyone would have treated me differently. I would have gotten the sanitized version of the company, the version management wants shareholders to see. I met his eyes. Instead, I got the real version. I saw how Trevor treats people he considers beneath him. I saw which managers actually care about their teams and which ones are just positioning for their next promotion. I saw where the company is strong and where it's vulnerable. You could have told me. Your own father. Could I have? Dad, when I called you 4 years ago to tell you about the Singapore startup, you hung up on me. You said I was wasting my life and you didn't want to hear about another failure in the making. He flinched. I don't remember saying that. I do. Word for word. It's why I stopped trying to tell you about my successes. I softened my tone slightly. I'm not trying to punish you. I'm trying to save the company grandfather built. Trevor's approach would have destroyed it within 5 years. And your approach? Focus on sustainable growth. Invest in our people. Protect our core competencies while slowly modernizing operations. And for God's sake, stop treating long-term employees like disposable resources. I stood. I know this is a lot to absorb. Take some time to process it. We can talk more next week. Kyle. He stopped me at the door. I'm sorry. For not listening. For assuming you'd failed because you didn't follow the path I wanted for you. I appreciate that. And for what it's worth, I'm proud of what you've built. Both in Singapore and here. It was the first time he'd said those words in years. I nodded, not trusting my voice, and left. In the hallway, I nearly collided with Trevor. He'd been waiting outside the boardroom, his expression dark. This isn't over, he said quietly. Yes, it is. The quantum deal is dead. Your cost-cutting campaign is over. And if you try to undermine the new direction, I'll vote to remove you from the board. You'd fire your own brother? I'd fire an executive who's putting his own interests ahead of the company. Family doesn't change fiduciary duty. I started to walk past him, then paused. For what it's worth, Trevor, you're good at parts of this job. You're strategic, you understand market dynamics, and you can close deals. But you've lost sight of why the company exists in the first place. It's not just a vehicle for executive enrichment. Easy to say when you're already rich. I was saying the same thing when I was sorting mail for $18 an hour. Money doesn't change principles, Trevor. It just reveals them. I left him standing in the hallway and took the elevator back down to the mailroom. Rita was at her desk, reading the company-wide memo I'd sent canceling Trevor's weekend work requirement. She looked up when I entered, and her eyes widened at my suit. Kyle, what's going on? Long story. The short version is that I own most of the company now, and nobody's working unpaid weekends. She stared at me for a long moment, then started laughing. You own the company. You've been working in my mailroom for 6 months and you own the company. 73% of it, yes. And you let Trevor treat you like... She laughed harder. Oh, that boy must be furious. He's processing. I bet he is. She sobered slightly. Does this mean you're leaving? Moving up to an executive office? Actually, I'd like to stay down here a bit longer. That's okay with you. I'm learning a lot. You want to keep working in the mailroom even though you own the company. Is that weird? Honey, it's the weirdest thing I've heard in 40 years at this company. But I like it. She smiled. You're welcome to stay as long as you want. Though I reserve the right to laugh about this for the rest of my career. Fair enough. Over the next 3 months, the transformation began. I brought in consultants to review operations, not the usual efficiency experts who recommended layoffs, but organizational psychologists and process improvement specialists who actually talked to frontline employees. We discovered that Marcus in shipping had been right. His logistics ideas could save millions. We implemented them and promoted him to Director of Supply Chain Operations. We found that Rita's institutional knowledge of company processes was essentially irreplaceable. We created a new position for her, VP of Operational Excellence, with a mandate to document and optimize core processes before she retired. We restructured the Advanced Materials Division, increasing investment and bringing in new engineering talent. Within a year, it would become our fastest-growing segment. And we killed the quantum deal, paid the breakup fee, and watched our stock price rise as investors realized we were serious about long-term value creation. Trevor stayed on as VP of Corporate Development, but under much closer supervision. To his credit, once the shock wore off, he began to adapt. He started spending time in the facilities talking to employees, learning the business from the ground up the way I had. At a board meeting 6 months after the revelation, he approached me during a break. I've been thinking about what you said. About principles and money, just revealing them. Yeah. You were right. I got so focused on climbing the ladder that I forgot why the ladder existed in the first place. He paused. I'm sorry. For how I treated you and for how I was planning to treat this company. Thank you for saying that. I want to do better. Actually build something sustainable instead of just optimizing for my next promotion. He offered his hand. Think you can work with me on that? I shook it. I think I can. My father retired as CEO a year later, after helping to establish the new strategic direction. The board offered me the position, but I declined. Instead, we brought in an external candidate with experience in sustainable manufacturing and a track record of valuing employees. I remained on the board, attending meetings in my usual casual clothes, often coming directly from a shift in whatever department I was studying that month. The other board members had stopped commenting on my wardrobe. At a family dinner 2 years after the revelation, my mother raised her glass. A toast to Kyle, who proved that success doesn't always look the way we expect it to. And who taught us all a lesson about assumptions, my father added. Trevor smiled wryly. And who will never let me forget the time I wouldn't let him into a boardroom because he was dressed like mailroom staff. To be fair, I said, I was mailroom staff. You were the majority owner dressed like mailroom staff. There's a difference. Is there? I was doing the same work either way. The ownership didn't change who I was or what I contributed. My father nodded slowly. That's the point, isn't it? The work mattered regardless of who owned the company. We just couldn't see it until you forced us to look. Exactly. I still keep an office in the mailroom. Rita is my VP of Operational Excellence now, but she still stops by with coffee and stories about the old days. Marcus revolutionized our supply chain and just opened our first carbon-neutral distribution center. And Trevor? He's actually become one of our most effective executives, because he finally learned to value people over spreadsheets. Harman Industries is profitable, sustainable, and ranked as one of the best places to work in our industry. We didn't get there by cutting costs or chasing quarterly earnings. We got there by remembering that companies are made of people, and people deserve respect regardless of their position on an org chart. It's a lesson I learned in the mailroom, even though I own 73% of the company. Or maybe especially because I own 73% of the company and chose to work there anyway. The signature that blocked Trevor's terrible merger didn't come from a corner office or an executive suite. It came from someone who understood the company from the ground up, who knew its people by name, who'd sorted their packages and delivered their documents and learned what actually made the business work. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is choose to see what others overlook. And sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's just being exactly who you are and letting that truth speak for itself.